The girl stood barefoot in the heart of Beehive's dusty market. Her feet, cracked and bleeding, left faint smears on the parched ground, her eyes darting for an escape that wasn't there. The debt collector seized her arm, dragging her into the open like a prize of his cruelty. The crowd stilled, some turned away, others watched, their silence heavier than the midday sun. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Someone whispered a prayer. Someone else spat on the ground. The debt collector's voice boomed across the square. $8, and her family's too proud to pay. Let's see what pride's worth in Beehive. He pulled a single coin from his pocket and flipped it into the dirt. There's $1. Pick it up, girl. That's more than you're worth now. Abigail stood frozen. The crowd began to murmur. Someone laughed. Another turned away. Pick it up. He barked again. Grabbing her arm, she stumbled, trying to pull free. The fabric of her dress tore at the shoulder, baring her skin. The laughter died. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. She bent down, voice shaking. He paid $1. I took it off, because it hurt less than being dragged through the dirt. From the market's edge, a man stepped forward. Broad shoulders, dusty hat, a weathered face marked by years alone. He didn't speak. He simply shrugged off his worn leather coat and draped it over her shoulders, shielding her from the stares. The crowd grew even quieter. The debt collector's grin faltered. He loosened his grip, stepping back as the man, Elias Boone, a reclusive rancher known in these parts, stepped closer, without a word. Elias pulled 2 silver coins from his pocket and tossed them into the dirt. There, he said, calm but firm. You've had your show. Take it and be done. Then he turned, took off his worn leather coat, and wrapped it over the girl's shoulders. You're leaving, he told her quietly. Now. For a moment, she thought he was just another man paying to claim her. But when he looked at her, really looked, she realized he wasn't buying her freedom. He was giving it back. The crowd parted as he led her away. No one stopped him. The collector said nothing. The moment had already turned against him. Abigail stood still, clutching the coat to her chest. For a long moment she wavered, then followed Elias toward the street's edge, her bare feet unsteady. No one called after her. No one dared. Her voice broke the silence, soft and uncertain. You paid for me. Why? He didn't turn, didn't answer. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the road, and in that silence, the question lingered. Was she walking towards safety or into a darker debt, waiting to be paid? The road out of Beehive stretched long and quiet. Dust rose behind them, curling like smoke from an old wound. Abigail walked barefoot beside Elias, clutching the coat around her shoulders. Neither spoke. The only sound was the crunch of gravel and the soft breath of the horses. When they reached the old ranch and the sun was already low, the place looked half alive, half forgotten. A few fences leaned like tired men. The windmill creaked as it turned. Abigail stopped at the gate, unsure if this was shelter or another kind of trap. Elias tied his horse and opened the door. Inside, the air smelled of wood, dust, and quiet. He pointed toward a small cot in the corner. You can rest there. There's water by the stove, bread too. She hesitated, waiting for something else, maybe an order or a price. But he turned away, took a seat near the window, and said nothing more. When she finally sat down, her legs trembled from the weight of fear more than the walk. That night, she didn't sleep. Every sound made her flinch. Once, when the floorboards creaked, she held her breath. But it was only Elias, stepping out to put wood on the fire. He didn't look at her, didn't ask questions, just kept the fire alive. Morning came soft and gray. She woke to the smell of coffee, saw a bowl of oatmeal waiting on the table. He was outside fixing a fence, moving slow but steady. For the first time in months, no one was yelling, no one was watching her like property. She ate in silence, each bite strange but warm. Over the next few days, she stayed quiet, watching him from the corner. She learned from a faded photo on the mantel that he'd lost his wife to a fever years back. Maybe that's why he understood silence better than words. Slowly, she began sweeping the floor, patching a tear in an old blanket. Feeding the chickens? Elias didn't tell her to. He just nodded once when he saw her working. A small gesture, but it felt like trust. Then breathe while you can. For a moment, they both stood silent, the rain tapping against the roof. The storm washed away some of the fear, but not all. Not yet. In those quiet moments, she remembered her mother's old stories of the frontier, how kindness from strangers could mend a broken spirit like a warm quilt on a cold prairie night. Elias reminded her of that. A man shaped by loss, yet still holding on to decency. Abigail looked at him, really looked, and saw something steady in those tired eyes, something that didn't want to own her, only to understand her. But deep down, she knew peace like this never lasted long in places like Beehive. Someone always came back to collect what the world still owed. And that someone was already on his way. And the storm passed, but peace didn't stay long. 2 mornings later, the sound of wagon wheels echoed down the dirt road. Elias looked up from the barn, squinting against the sun. He knew trouble by the sound of it. The wagon stopped by the fence. The debt collector climbed down, his boots sinking into the mud. Behind him stood another man, younger, meaner, his hand resting too easy on the butt of his pistol. Abigail froze by the porch steps, a bucket still in her hand. Her heart felt like it might burst out of her chest. Well, look who's found herself a savior, the collector sneered. $8. Boone, I'm here for what's mine. Elias wiped his hands on his jeans, slow and steady. You already took what wasn't yours, he said. Now get off my land. The man laughed. You don't scare me, old man. That girl belongs to me till the debt's paid. Abigail took a step back, her voice barely a whisper. You don't own me, the younger man smirked. She will if you can't pay. That was the moment Elias stopped talking. He walked into the barn, the sound of his boots echoing against the wood. The air thickened. The collector shifted his weight, glancing toward his partner. Then Elias stepped back out, rifle in hand. The Winchester glinted under the morning light. He didn't shout, didn't aim right away. He just took one slow step forward, another, and another. Each step made the space between them smaller, tighter, more dangerous. You think you can point that thing and scare me? The collector barked, but his voice cracked halfway through. Elias's eyes didn't blink. I don't point unless I mean it, he said. The younger man reached for his pistol, but the look Elias gave him stopped his hand cold. Even the horses went still. For a moment, it felt like the whole world forgot to breathe. Leave, Elias said quietly. Now. The collector spat on the ground, cursed under his breath, and climbed back onto the wagon. Dust rose behind them as they rode away, smaller and smaller until they disappeared into the hills. Abigail stood there, shaken, not from fear, but from something new. Something that felt a lot like safety. Elias turned and lowered the rifle and said only one thing. Next time, I won't ask twice. The silence after was long, but not heavy. It reminded me of tales my grandfather told around the campfire, about men who stood tall, not with words, but with quiet resolve. In the Old West, a man's rifle was his word, and Elias embodied that steadfast spirit, protecting what was right without fanfare. It was the kind of silence that made you believe the worst was over, even if deep down you knew it wasn't. So, what would you have done in his boot? Would you have stood your ground or turned away like the others back in Beehive? Take a sip of your coffee or tea, wherever you are, and tell me what time it is and where you're listening from. And if you want to hear how this story ends, you know what to do. Hit that subscribe button and stay with me for the next part. Because trust me, the hardest part hasn't come yet. A week later, the quiet held, but Elias seemed restless. Abigail found Elias sitting by the window, counting something in his hand. It was money, old and worn, maybe $8 if that. Every coin looked like it had been kept for years. You don't have to do that, she said softly. He didn't look up. I do, he answered. Some debts need paying, even if they're not mine. He stood, walked to the old wooden chest at the foot of his bed, and took out a small cloth bag. That's all I've got left, he said. Your father owes $8. You take this. Go back to town. Make it right. Abigail's throat tightened. That money is your life, Elias. He nodded once. Maybe, but life don't mean much if you can't sleep at night. She wanted to argue, but couldn't. The truth in his voice stopped her cold. later that day. She hitched his horse and rode into Beehive. Her hand shook the whole way. People stared as she passed, whispering, remembering that day in the market. At the law office, the debt collector sat behind a desk, smug as ever. "Well, look who's back," he said. Abigail set the coins on the table one by one, her eyes steady. $8, every cent. But we both know the original debt was $3. The rest is illegal interest, usury under the law. Now sign it, or I'll have the sheriff read that paper out loud in front of the church on Sunday. His grin faded. He signed. There was a satisfaction in that moment. The kind that comes from justice served after long hardship, like harvesting a crop you'd planted through storms. For folks like us, who've seen our share of tough times, it's a reminder that perseverance pays off. And just like that, the weight of a year slipped from her shoulders. When she walked out, an old man waited near the hitch post. Her father, gray, thin, shaken. He'd heard the whispers in town about her return and come back. Too late, but full of regret. "I thought I was saving you by running," he said. She shook her head. "You didn't save me, Pa." "He did. But I saved myself today." He nodded, too ashamed to speak, and walked away down the dusty street. She didn't call after him. For the first time, she didn't have to. That evening, she returned to the ranch. Elias was still by the fire, boots off, sipping his coffee. She dropped the empty cloth bag on the table. "It's done," she said. He gave a small nod, eyes fixed on the flames. "Good." Then it's over. For a long time, neither spoke. The fire cracked. The night breathed through the open window, and peace finally felt real. But as the wind shifted, Elias looked toward the dark horizon. He could feel it before he saw it. Something was coming. Maybe the past wasn't finished after all. The days after that felt different, lighter. The ranch that once stood quiet now sounded alive again. The chickens clucked, the horses stirred, and the sound of laughter, small and rare, began to find its ways into the dust. Abigail moved through the house like she belonged there. She mended fences, cooked when she could, and left coffee on the porch every morning before Elias started his chores. He never said much, just a nod, a glance, sometimes a quiet hum when he thought no one was listening. One evening, the wind was soft, and the sun sank slow behind the hills. Elias sat by the corral, repairing a saddle strap that she'd stitched wrong. He didn't scold her, didn't correct her harshly. He just smiled, the kind of smile that came once in a season, and said, "You almost had it right." She laughed, the sound surprising even herself. For the first time, it didn't feel like laughter needed permission. It was simple. Free. Later. When the lanterns burned low, she handed him a handkerchief she'd sewn. 2 small letters rested in the corner, E and B. He turned it in his hands, slow and thoughtful. "What's this for?" he asked. She looked at him, eyes steady. "For saving me," she said, then paused. "No, for seeing me." He didn't answer, but something changed in the air between them. Not a spark, but a warmth. A steady kind of peace that didn't need words. That night, the fire crackled as the stars filled the sky. Abigail sat quietly beside him, both of them watching the flames dance. She whispered, almost to herself, "They bought my body for $1, but you gave me something no one else ever could." Elias turned, his voice gentle. "What's that?" She smiled. The chance to start over. In the glow of that fire, it felt like the simple joys of life returning. The warmth of companionship after years of solitude, much like rediscovering an old friend's letter in a forgotten drawer. Bringing back the comfort of enduring bonds. And maybe that's what healing really is. Not forgetting where you came from, but finally believing you deserve where you are. Sometimes it's not the loud heroes that save us, but the quiet ones who just show up and stay. And maybe, just maybe, love doesn't always have to be spoken to be felt. So tell me this, when was the last time you gave someone peace, even if it cost you something? When was the last time you forgave yourself enough to begin again? Take a breath. Take a sip of your coffee or tea. And if this story touched you, If it made you think or maybe feel a little something, give this video a like and hit subscribe so you don't miss the next story waiting down the road. Because out here in the Wild West, every scar has a story, and every story deserves to be told.